Perfect. And then a little bit about us. My name is Andy Saldana. I'm the Executive Director of New York Tech Alliance, and we're a nonprofit organization working on diversifying, driving access, equity, and inclusion within the New York Tech ecosystem to make it the most diverse in the world. If you want to learn more about us, you can find us at nytech.org, and you can always email me at andy@nytech.org. A quick thank you to all of our wonderful annual partners that make everything that we do possible. And a very special thank you to Mastercard Start Path, which is a global engagement startup program focused on early stage and scaling startups. In fact, we have Sabrina here from the program, and Fonta has been part of the program, so I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that during today's event. If you learn more, feel free to check them out on our partner page at nytech.org/partners Mastercard Start Path. Our next event, so we're going to take a quick pause for the remainder of 2021 and early into 2022, but we'll be back in 2022 with a great alignment of fantastic events. So stay tuned to nytech.org for upcoming events. And then if you have a tech event that you want to share with the community, make sure that you do that on our community calendar at nytech.org/events. If you want to watch past conversations from the Founder Spotlights, always check them out at nytech.info/founder spotlights. I will share this link with everybody in the chat as well. And with that, that brings us to today's conversation. So I'm going to stop presenting and turn it over to Sabrina Tharani from Mastercard to introduce yourself, and then we'll bring on Fonta.
Thank you so much, Andy, and hello, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be with you today. Last, hopefully, productive week for everybody before we all take some time with family and friends to really round out the year. But by way of very brief introduction, my name is Sabrina Tharani, and I lead a program at Mastercard called Start Path. What Start Path is really Mastercard's formal startup engagement program, and we endeavor to work with fintechs from right across the globe and try and help them scale by providing them full and open access to Mastercard's ecosystem. So this means our suite of products, this means access to our customers and channels, and indeed it also just means access to our subject matter experts across the world. So today, I'm proud to say that the program is about 6 years old, and in that time, we've built the portfolio up to just under 300 companies in 42 countries, and we are now launching additional programs as we see the need. So we have a program specific to crypto, we have a program specific to open finance, and indeed we have a program specific to early stage and underrepresented founders, particularly in North America. So without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome our friend, my personal friend, and one of the most rock star people I've ever met in my life, Fonta, who will be the star of this show. So Fonta, I'm going to pass it to you to do an introduction. I have so many questions for you over the next hour, but hopefully those on the line will also jump in either through the chat or by unmuting themselves. But Fonta, can you start to give us a little bit of an introduction on yourself, and maybe start with your personal background and your journey to a founder, because that's unbelievably interesting.
Sure. No, thank you, Sabrina. Hi guys, good afternoon. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for taking the time to chat with us today. So my name is Fonta. I am the CEO and co-founder at Wellthi. Before launching our company, I actually worked as an American diplomat for 10 years. The US government sent me to live and work first in East Asia, South Korea, China, Singapore, and then all over sub-Saharan Africa. And a lot of my portfolio was working with foreign banks and governments to really try and design innovative ways to unlock capital for women exporters, small businesses that wanted to do business with the United States. And it was really there that I was exposed to a lot of the informal social saving and lending clubs that were happening in so many immigrant communities in America, as well as in these emerging markets. And these experiences, kind of being able to observe how people were pooling resources and rotating them and using that as a way to build wealth, do things like send their kids to school, buy land, start businesses, even immigrate to America, I was fascinated by it. There were translations for it in China and Korea, India, all over Africa. I researched and studied what works about those groups and what doesn't. And Wellthi really took the best of those informal traditions, how peer pressure and reputational risk and FOMO can really help people keep their financial commitments to a group when they might not in isolation. We took those learnings and built them into our tech. And so here at Wellthi, we offer an embedded social finance software. It's really designed to take the best of those traditions and what is really kind of the human nature behind behavioral sciences and build them into cutting edge fintech and machine learning. Banks can license our technology as a way to turn one customer into a community of customers by tapping into the power of peer pressure and peer networks, I should say, and online communities. And so I'm really excited about what we've been doing, and StartPath has been amazing for us, and I'll stop there.
Thank you, Fonta. So maybe we'll just spend a little bit more time on the founding journey a little bit before we go deeper into Wellthi. So some might argue that governments aren't that innovative, not that technology enabled, and not that forward thinking. So how did you go from being an ambassador and a government employee to being a fintech, one of the rising fintech founders in the United States? So I guess the question is there, like, you know, what point in your career did you realize that it was worth taking the chance on your idea and leaving everything you knew behind to found a fintech startup?
Yes, leaving that good government job, right? No, it's true. And to be completely transparent, I was not an ambassador. Maybe down the line, I was a foreign service officer, so a young diplomat.
Excuse me, that was my mistake.
yes. But yeah, so I mean, you know, it's interesting. You know how the universe kind of puts something in front of you. Literally every country I was going to, I got to see firsthand what people were using these traditions. At the time, I was really frustrated by the lack of fintech technologies and tools that were available to me as a program manager and a diplomat working on behalf of the US to do some really challenging things in some really challenging markets. We just didn't have the tools. And oftentimes a lot of our policies and programs tended to be kind of a one size fits all approach just because of the sheer magnitude and volume of the need in so many countries, including the United States. We weren't using fintech, we weren't good at it. We weren't good at partnering with corporations and fintechs. We didn't really have a lot of models to do that at that time. And so that actually became a large part of my work, coming up with creative ways to partner to really bridge that gap between the public and private sector, understanding like what the possibilities are in fintech and innovation and how those tools could be applied to help drive government mandates forward. And you know, once you get an idea as a founder, you can't shake it. I was looking around my community in DC and I said, you know, a lot of the innovation that I was working on abroad, what if we can mainstream it, modernize it, and actually introduce it as a social finance software that could really be mainstreamed anywhere and really would allow banks to tap into the power of social finance. And, you know, I got the initial fellowship through Echoing Green. I encourage you all to check it out if you haven't heard of that. They literally funded us when we were an idea. And that gave us the initial seed funding to start research and development and testing different products. And here I am.
It's amazing. And Echoing Green, I would reiterate that they're just they're a fantastic partner for socially driven, mission-oriented businesses. So Fonta, when you got that first kind of positive signal from Echoing Green, had you left your day job already? And where were you personally in your life when you were making all these decisions? Because it's obviously pretty risky to leave a job like what you had, a very powerful, high, well-positioned job to take this risk on a business.
No, that's a great question. It wasn't easy. And actually, I left the State Department. I was working in DC as a management consultant at Deloitte. And also a very high-performing, high-profile job, making great money. And, you know, there were a couple of things that kind of, you know, at that time, to be quite honest, I was a single mom. I was trying to figure out, you know, what I wanted to do. My current kind of role really wasn't feeding my soul from a social impact perspective and the way that I wanted at the time. I had an idea that I couldn't shake. And I think it was really a combination of family support, even though they were very freaked out and had no idea why I would want to leave that kind of opportunity. And then also just kind of believing in yourself. You know, when you've worked in these difficult situations and you know your capabilities, you know, you really have to have those positive affirmations in mind and know that whatever you touch and build is going to be successful. All you got to do is work at it. And my grandfather once told me, the only way it won't work is if you don't work. And so, applied that same tenacity to Wellthi, and I've never looked back.
It's incredible. So yeah, I mean, that was kind of my next question, which is this, in those really early days, as you were both making the personal transition and the, starting to build and test and research a product, who were the go-to people that you relied on for support at that time? And I guess that can be both, again, professionally, like who was there in the early days helping you build out the app and the proposition, and then also who did you rely on at home?
Yeah, so we were very lean team. Actually started reaching out to my professional network. I knew a lot of talented people, both in tech, in finance, also kind of AI and machine learning, just folks that I had worked with in the past, who also wanted to explore something creative. A lot of times that's the best place to go to is as former colleagues and friends who are talented and have the skill sets that you need. And I started the business with $7,000, believe it or not. And one of the ways that I was able to do that was also cultivating a lot of mentors and advisors. You can get access to some pretty brilliant people who will share some really valuable information and strategies to kind of how to structure your business, how to cultivate the traction that you need by bootstrapping in a lean startup kind of way so that you can get the funding that you want. And so I was definitely blessed to have that kind of network. Also looked at a lot of technical talent. I didn't start out with a CTO, and there are good and bad things with that as a non-technical founder. But one of the good things that came out of that is what it gave me the time to really cultivate and work with different types of technologists to find out who was the right fit for us and really understood the product and where we wanted to take it. And I think also there's a lot of, especially now, a lot of really great tools out there that you can use to get off the ground. Tools that will help you prototype your software before you build it and even pre-sell it before you build it. And so I look a lot at those types of resources as well, because the last thing you want to do is spend a whole lot of time and money into something that you don't, that you haven't talked to your customers about and really sold to them in advance is my motto.
Great. So now maybe we'll move a little bit more to kind of product and fundraising a bit. Yeah. So at what point did you go out for your first institutional check? How far along was the product, and when did you start to realize that you wanted to raise more traditional capital?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I started the company, we went straight into R&D, research and development, and we were testing a lot of different business models. We initially started out as B2C, and there were a few other fintechs that were experimenting with this concept of modernizing informal social finance traditions, who were also B2C. And we took the hard work of testing, of starting with a very minimum viable product, testing that with users as well as a network of 22 banks. We're really co-creating it with them. And coming out of that model, we learned that B2C wasn't the play. We were leaving a lot of opportunity and money on the table, to be quite honest, by not licensing our technology directly to financial institutions. And we were also, it's really tough and expensive to go direct to consumer with a B2C mobile app. And so we pivoted after that period, a year and a half, kind of head down, testing the app. We did it with 3 cities along in the United States, as well as in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. Leveraged a lot of kind of accelerator support to do that as well. But when we came out of it, we had a product that I knew that banks wanted to buy. I knew what those feature sets needed to be and how we needed to upgrade our minimal viable product into what is now I like to call Tesla. So we went from our ugly baby to our Tesla version of the software. Yep. We actually launched this new pivot at Finovate Spring in San Francisco. It got on the radar of a lot of banks and card networks. And from there, we were able to, we had trusted partners who had co-created with us, which I think was key. And that gave them the comfort and the excitement around our product and how we were improving upon it based upon their specific use cases and needs in the market. And we were able to pre-sell the newest version of our technology. One other thing I'll say is cannot stress the importance of paid pilots. They really help to kind of keep your traction along and your user base along. But that pivot and being able to iterate and co-create with the banks that we actually wanted to service, who are in clients, is how we were able to get ready and show the traction for our I guess I'll say pre-seed rounds. when COVID hit, we had several investors pull out. It was heartbreaking. People just stopped investing. Cities shut down. We had government contracts that shut down through paid pilots that we were working on. And it was tough. And my co-founder, Neka, and I sat down together and we said, look, we're gonna do this anyway. We're gonna hit the streets, or I guess I should say Zoom. We did a lot of Zoom calls. We were very persistent, but we were able to close our seed round just after COVID hit. Well, I guess I'll say at the end of COVID. And so, you know, it's just about tenacity, you know, and knowing that you have to really just be okay with going through the pitches and engaging investors, taking the feedback, good or bad, and making your pitch and your business model better the next time. And that's what we did. And we were able to close that. And we're really excited about where we are now. So yeah, I don't know if there are other things you wanted me to hit on, Sabrina.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just to stay on the fundraising topic a little bit longer, because I think that's something that keeps, you know, all early stage founders up at night, is you had statistically a lot up against you in a pandemic, female and of color. So I mean, what are some of the challenges that you face that you think uniquely were yours versus some of your you know, other people raising in similar spaces at the same time?
Totally. So we've all heard the statistics. You know, if you're a woman and you're a founder, you know, you're getting, I think, less than 2% now. If you're a Black, those odds are even greater. You know, I being the optimistic, historically successful woman and professional that I am, felt like, you know, we can beat those odds. And ultimately we were able to, but it was definitely tough. And I saw a lot of that. There were situations there where I would be pitching and I would have the same traction as some of my white male friends, and they would get picked up for investment, but I would be too early. You know, oftentimes I feel like we are expected, women in particular, are expected to have a lot more traction at certain levels than some of our other counterparts. I've been in discussions with investors where they've said to me, we love the idea, we love the business, but how can you really get this kind of growth with kids at home? You know, we're really not confident you'll be able to multitask that way. Literally, I've had folks say that to me in investor pitches. So, you know, you learn to roll with it. You work with what you have. One of the good things I think is that, you know, having to go far and beyond just to get the same level of investment that others have made us a stronger business. It's forced us to show more traction and made us more resilient. And some of my friends that got funded early on ended up wasting a lot of money on products and services that were not the right fit because they didn't have to do that hard work. So it's been a blessing in disguise. And I think that the only thing that you can really do is find those investors that really get you and get your product and are willing to believe in you as a founder and in your team. And I think those folks are out there. It's just a matter of getting to that person.
And how do you find those investors? You know, Fonta, how?
Yeah.
I mean, because, you know, increasingly diligence and, you know, accepting capital becomes a two-way conversation. I mean, obviously, money's money and you want to raise, but a lot of founders now are much more specific and prescriptive about the types of VCs that they want to work with, who have similar ethos, who are supportive and hands-on in helping you create your business. So how do you identify who those venture firms are? And then in the diligence process, you know, how did you decide who you wanted to accept capital from?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it kind of varies as you go in rounds. When you're at the kind of friends and family stage or even the pre-seed stage, oftentimes it's your personal network. And for me, it wasn't my family. I didn't come from a background of family members that really knew what venture capital was. It wasn't something that we did. And I was kind of one of the more affluent members of my family. And so that wasn't really an option for me. But what I did have was a professional network. And you'd be surprised who your old college buddies who are now hotshot lawyers, for example, or your accountants might know, that can put you in front of people who do have the kind of investor thesis that you're looking for and have the funds to deploy. And so that's what we did early on. My co-founder, Neka, is absolutely brilliant in terms of her relationships and her ability to make kind of be very strategic and getting in front of the right people that have the right types of capital at your level. And so definitely leaned on her in terms of how we were able to raise that round while I was working more on the business and getting to market and sales. That helped a lot, having a chief investment officer, not someone that you pay who's a weird consultant who's like, you know, some car salesman for you. You know, VCs hate that. But having somebody on the team who's vested, who is putting in the hard work, who functions as a chief investment officer, that was huge for us. And it opened up a lot of doors for us that I would have never had access to otherwise. And then I think also through kind of accelerator programs like StartPath, we have gotten an incredible amount of access and introductions through programs like that. StartPath has put us in front of so many people, which has been huge. And so I really encourage folks to participate in programs like that as well, because they open doors.
Great, great, Fonta. And then my last kind of question on the fundraising front is, I think and then we'll take some questions from the audience as well, but I think one of the things that you've uniquely thought about with NECA is also alternative forms of capital, because not everything has to be dilutive equity capital, and it might come in smaller check sizes, but certainly, matter along the way. So what are some of the ways that you think about some of those alternative sources of capital in the early days?
Oh, totally. I mean, a lot of our paid pilots came through grants. Banks have CRA, Community Reinvestment Act requirements. US government requires them to invest money into projects, into the community development projects. Oftentimes, fintech overlook that resource. They're spending upwards of $400 million a year on CRA. And so what we did was went not necessarily after our typical target bank client, which would be more the CMO. We went after the CRA officer who had grant funds they needed to deploy. They're used to doing pilots with nonprofits and earlier stage companies because they're willing to test with you to see if you can figure stuff out. And so that non-dilutive capital was golden. We didn't have to give up a lot of equity. We were able to get funds really quickly. They tend to move a lot faster, especially if you're partnering with a nonprofit, to show how your technology works. So I highly recommend that. There's also a lot of grant opportunities through the accelerators, obviously. And then I think also government contracting is an interesting resource that a lot of people don't think about. I was aware of it because I had been on both sides of the fence, both a government contractor and a government official. And so I knew the pots of funding that were out there where you could literally use your expertise as a founder to win a contract that allows you to keep your business going that, again, does not take equity and is actually revenue. And so we did a lot of that as well. We partnered with DC government, for example, a lot of different other corporate and government partners. And that was huge for us, non-dilutive as well. And then lastly, something that we're looking at in the future is maybe debt capital. Rates are really cheap right now. And getting a business loan, especially with all the SBA programs that are out there, can be a great way to get you off the ground and help your cash flow.
Really, really helpful. And I think kind of the hidden secret in fundraising, right?
Yeah.
So that was really insightful. So now maybe moving on to product a little bit. We have a question from the audience that's really about the transition from B2C to B2B. Mm-hmm. So in part, what was the experience or the insight that made you realize that you needed to pivot your model? And then I think the following question that I had was selling to banks is not easy. And so how did you convince them to get to work with you before you had something tangible, scalable, proven out, risk averse, all of that?
Great question. Yes. Okay. So in terms of the pivot, as we were running these pilots with, thousands of users in these different cities for, everything from startups to first-time home buyers to just, millennials and Gen Z, what we found is that, to be quite honest, direct to consumer, people don't really want to pay fees like that. We're in a culture where, it's a race to the bottom in terms of lowest fees possible. And it was really difficult for us to get the kind of customer acquisition we want if we were trying to charge people directly. But what we did find is that our banks that we were co-creating with and getting their feedback on our apps and the types of customers they were looking for, they were voracious and were spending upwards of $1,400 to $1,600 per customer in customer acquisition costs. A lot of those traditional methods for them really weren't working, like branches, for example. Over 4,000 of them have shuttered since 2017. Their customer acquisition costs were skyrocketing during COVID. They were looking for anything that could help them to get to their target customer segment, and they had the budget for it. And so realizing what that kind of meant for our model and our business model and pricing strategy, it was a no-brainer, really. Why go after the consumer when I can service banks and actually give the consumers a free product that really enriches and empowers them? And so it was really the best of the both worlds. And we got positive feedback from users as well as lenders to do that. And the banks were receptive as well, because we were showing that we could actually address a common pain point that a lot of them are facing right now, which is how do you stay competitive in this super competitive and fragmented fintech kind of market. And the last question was around, I think, risk averse.
Well, yeah, just, the general process in working with the bank. I mean, they're definitely not the easiest to sell into. And I think,
yeah,
it's clear that you're satisfying a need. So I think that first point is all about, show up at the right time, right place, but also like solve something legitimate that they're looking for. But just in terms of like actually selling into the bank, what did that process look like for you?
Yeah, you're right. It's not easy, especially when you're early stage to get that first bank or that first 3 banks, to be quite honest. A lot of it comes down to, one, having your regulatory compliance policies and procedures buttoned up. And when I say buttoned up, I mean, presented in a way that banks want to see, making sure you're addressing any legal and regulatory risks or questions that they're going to have in advance of the meeting, and actually having slides dedicated on that. We actually were very intentional about the law firms that we were working with and the compliance experts that we were bringing on, because we knew that was going to be a pain point up front. So that's one. I also think, the accelerators play a great part in that, and I don't know if StartPath considers themselves that, but they are an enabler and just on access. And being able to get into a program like that can really provide you with the legitimacy that you need to make banks feel comfortable, because they know that you're doing it on Mastercard's rails, right? Which is the best in the business. And so that also helps. These programs can be long and labor intensive, and they can seem kind of like they might be a distraction, but you'd be surprised what you learn. And getting that kind of partnership opportunity is invaluable when you're trying to sell to a risk-averse client like a bank, and can actually help to increase your sales cycle, or decrease it, I should say.
Yeah, and banks, we're using banks because we're both in fintech, but as a proxy, insurance, it's not like selling an insure tech or health tech or government tech. There's a lot of agencies where the existing institutions who are ultimately your end customers are these regulated, risk-averse behemoth players, and it's banks are essentially no different in that conversation. So for those in line in other industries, I think the insight's the same.
Yep, absolutely.
So then, one of the things that at the early stage too is, you're running really fast to get everything built, of course, but what are some of the growth hacks that you use to get some of the early users on board? Because obviously you said it yourself, it's very expensive, but even before you get to the point where you're ready for like a sales cycle, how do you get user feedback quickly and
that's a great question.
And cheaply?
Right, cheaply, if it's not cheaply. Yeah, so 2 of my favorite books. One, Lean Startup. Sounds like a cliche, but like definitely one of my Bibles when it comes to professional Bibles. And then also Sprint. We actually got the benefit early on of getting some mentors from some old fintech heads out in Silicon Valley. And one guy sat down with me, he was like, Fonta, we never built anything before we prototype it and MVP it. And that was a game changer to me. And he was like, and this is a guy who had multiple exits and IPOs. He was like, my first MVP is typically a napkin that I'm drawing on with the client. And then from there, I'm putting that into some type of prototyping software like Envision. I love Envision. That will allow you'd be surprised what you can get done with a really strong UX UI talent and Envision, which will turn your designs into a clickable app that you can actually take into client meetings and demo and iterate quickly on. And then after testing those very low fidelity kind of prototypes with different customer segments, both users and the customer, depending upon your business model, only then do we start to think about, okay, now what clients can we go after? And we'll, branding your prototypes. People love to see their colors and brand on a prototype so they can see themselves in it. That's one hack that I love. Once we've gotten that positive feedback, and ideally you'd want some type of commercial relationship or an LOI, only then do I typically take it for build to my development team. And we had to do that out of really kind of, we didn't have options when you don't have a lot of funding, but really that's like, I would say sales 101. And a lot of fintechs think they need to dump all their money into the first thing they think of. And that's probably the worst thing that you can do. You waste a lot of money that way if you haven't tested it cheaply, a lot.
And not to say understate the importance of good design, right? Especially when you're bringing something like what Wellthi is doing is an entirely new construct for financial services into the market. How did you think about designing the right user experience and customer experience?
No, that's a great question. I cannot stress how important UX UI is, especially in today's fintech kind of landscape. People want something that's sleek and sexy and works really well. If you want to compete with the big guys, you have to have that done, and you have to focus on it in the same way that you would development or compliance. What we did was, we had so many different iterations using prototyping with my UX UI designer, and then literally would stop and test that with our target user, and take those learnings and go back and reiterate onto the prototype. So testing is a big deal for us. R&D, making sure that's right. It's hugely important, and it saves a lot of time on the back end when you are developing. So I, early on, I was using a lot of services like TopTal, which can help you find really great UX UI talent. Talking to a lot of mentors and advisors around folks that they knew in the space that have actually built products like you're trying to build. That's also key. Don't hire someone who's more of a retail UX UI person when you really need a fintech UX UI person. Those skill sets are hugely important so that your user experience is right. And then a lot of industry competitors can give you some real insights into what works and what doesn't, and how you can offer something better or more efficient.
That's really helpful. So some folks are asking if you could just reshare the names of the books that you had mentioned at the beginning of this answer.
I can. So I'll put those in the chat now.
Okay, and then yeah, there we go. And Sprint, yep, your Bibles, like you said. My next question is kind of on continued kind of customer acquisition and continued growth, because it doesn't stop once you have those first 3 banks on, right? So, from where I sit, and this is not meant to be, an advertisement for Starpath, you've participated in many other kind of corporate programs, so you feel free to reference those as well. But, I think the narrative has changed a lot. It used to be that fintechs and startups were up to combat kind of the incumbents and compete or challenge what the traditional industries were doing, again in financial services, but also in healthcare and insurtech and everything. But in the last 2 to 3 years, we've really seen that there's been a sea change there, and startups have now realized that we can actually be great channel partners for you to scale. We can help with introductions and pipeline and indeed, paid pilots, which are really important. So like, what are your thoughts on corporate startup partnerships, and like, how do you, we talk a lot about de-risking, working with early stage companies, and what we do, because we want to work with somebody who has demonstrated technology and solving a key pain point of ours. But the reverse is true. There's a lot of risk as a startup to take on too much from an individual customer potentially, because it could take away attention from you going after other customers or other segments. They might decide one day that they don't want to fund another pilot or go into full commercial scale after they've done the pilot with you. And so it's really hard to manage that pipeline. So what is just your thoughts and advice that you have for the founders on the line?
I think that for fintech in particular, channel partners are key, because our end clients are so risk averse. And so many people are coming to them with different types of solutions, oftentimes much larger and more established companies than you might be. And rarely I'll just be honest, it's very rare that most founders get the kind of access that Mastercard Starpath provides at early stage, I gotta say. We went through a pretty rigorous due diligence process with them, don't get me wrong. But once you're able to get into that program, we have had, for example, being able to talk to the different Mastercard units who actually have card issuing banks and credit unions that they're servicing, getting their feedback on our product and what is something that actually might be, co-sellable to their card issuing banks was huge. That kind of insight would take us, 6, probably 12-month sales cycle to get from a one-on interaction with the bank. And so you learn a lot through that expertise and that access. And I think it's even more valuable than funding, I would say, is the access, because you're learning about your customer. You are ground truthing your pricing models and your pricing strategy. You're getting access to the right individual at the bank, or for example, and then you're getting a warm referral to that institution, and you're doing it on the rails of a company that has just got a stellar reputation. And so if you're willing to put in the work and actually get into those programs, those channel partnerships will really cut your sales cycle in half. They will give you co-selling opportunities that weren't even on your radar before. And StartPath is really interesting because it's one of the few programs that I'm aware of that will actually help you scale globally, which is huge, especially if that's kind of in your purview.
Thank you, Fonta. This is
No,
being
I mean
recorded,
it,
right?
I really did. I totally made it. We've had a lot of really exciting opportunities working through StartPath.
Thank you. So I'm going to pause just for a second and see, does anybody on the line want to come off mute and ask a question?
Sure.
I know we've seen a few in the chat that I think we've covered, but is there anybody that wants to actually to ask directly?
Got a quiet group today.
Okay, well, offer stands. Oh, sorry.
It's Andy. I just had a question for you, Fonta. I know that the when you were starting this app, you were really focused on community lending and empowering communities to put that lending capability back into their hands, and social influence and things of that nature. So how do you protect that as you start to look at, as you pivoted to banks as a customer, but your ultimate customer is still these diverse communities? So how do you protect that as you scale as a founder and as you pivot as a founder into these different customer bases?
That's a great question. When we came out of R&D, we knew that the next iteration of Wellthi really needed to be something that was scalable, that could be deployed in any market globally, and something that we could mainstream. And so that did make us look at how we could actually offer something that was really an embedded social finance software that can accommodate many use cases, including the traditional one. But in doing that, we also were very intentional about remaining a social enterprise. We got a lot of pushback from investors early on about our double bottom line. We want to make money and we want to help people, full stop. That's one of the reasons why, I do what I do and I work so hard. And for me, that's an important part of our business, because it's taking care of the customer. If you can do that, the rest will come. And making sure that you stay true to that in your metrics, for example, building that into our KPIs, our key performance indicators each year. And each month, really, and thinking through, how are we driving revenue and how are we empowering these different groups? That was huge. And I think lately it's been really well received, especially coming out of COVID, which has really taught us that, when life happens and an emergency hit, you can go from here to there very quickly. And so I feel like people respect us for staying true to that social impact mission, which allows us to service that traditional informal groups, but also allows us to offer a product that anywhere, regardless of their socioeconomic status, can use Wellthi and see benefit from it. Helps us to scale in a way that we wouldn't be able to if we hadn't figured out a way to accommodate both.
Awesome, thank you. That was amazing.
I see a question, Sabrina, in the chat, maybe.
Yep, so I said, this one looks like it's from Emily, and she says, you mentioned a chief investment officer on your team to manage raising funds. Can you speak more about this role and how it worked with your team?
Yeah. It's funny. Sometimes as a founder, it can be really tough to pitch and sell yourself, buy yourself to investors. You're sitting in a Zoom call in a room, and you got you on one side and 10 or 12 people on the other, and they're firing questions at you. It can be really daunting. And oftentimes as a founder, if you haven't worked in the venture capital or the investment space, it can be hard to know the little nuances and the things that investors are looking for. Even if you're going to B school, it can be hard to kind of pick up on that. And so I remember reaching out to Nneka early on and really sitting down with her, because I knew that she kind of came from that world. She's an investor herself, an angel investor. She has worked with a lot of funds as a lawyer. And has also had a lot of really rich experience when it comes to how to get in front of high net worth individuals and angels, to be quite honest. And so bringing her on to the team was one of the best things that we could have ever done, because she really gave us an investment strategy that looked at, one, how we needed to make sure that Wellthi looked the part, cultivating our board and making sure that we have the right kind of generational expertise, the industry expertise that we need that investors would respect. And then also getting in front of the right funds at the right time and crafting that pitch. And so that position, when we actually formalized that, and she became a co-founder, she's just like anyone else on the team. And that's what I recommend. Treat that CIO in the same way you would a CTO or your chief product officer. They need to be on team calls. They need to know your business model in and out. They need to be able to pitch like you can pitch. And they need to be able to be a good bridge between you and investors, so that when you're walking in the room, your CIO has already teed you up and prepped the investor and set the cadence in the relationship that you need, so that you can come in and just knock out the pitch. For me, it made it a lot less stressful. And it also was a lot more effective, because we now had two people kind of dividing and conquering versus just one. And it allowed me to really kind of focus on the business. You're mute.
I am. So we have one more question on the line, and then we're going to go to a rapid fire from me. So get ready for that as the group thinks of a few more final questions. So this one's from Ethan, and he's wondering if you could share more about how you leverage behavioral science insights as part of your early R&D process.
Yeah. So as I was traveling through China and India, for example, I saw that a lot of people were pooling resources and rotating them outside the bank. And if you look at World Bank data, 2 billion people are doing this in emerging markets and immigrant communities across all of these different continents. And when I started to look under the hood and really talk to people that were involved in this, why would you even do this? How does this make sense? How do you manage it? And then why are they so impactful? Because a lot of the World Bank data showed that these savings and lending clubs had a less than 1% default rate. That's better than a collection agent getting you to pay in. That's better than a ding on your credit score. And so when I started to kind of really sit down with a lot of these women exporters that I was working with, for example, and these small business owners, these multi-generational families, what I found is that it was the positive peer pressure, the FOMO, that keeping up with the Joneses, that reputational risk of everyone putting in except you, that makes you keep your financial commitment to a group than you might do so in isolation. And I got fascinated by that, because the financial services industry is really the one industry that hasn't really tapped into the power of peer networks and the peer persuasion, peer accountability. And I really wanted to figure out a way, well, if this is really helping people build wealth and fund themselves when they can't get a loan from the bank or an investment from a VC. I come from that community. We need to figure out a way to mainstream this and offer it to anyone, right? And then I actually joined some of those different savings circles and experienced firsthand how they worked, and worked with a lot of people who managed them and learned kind of the intricacies of that. And so a lot of our technology and the innovation behind it is really focused on helping people save or invest as a group through your local bank. And that behavioral sciences, that Peloton kind of concept is really powerful, and what we're keying in on.
Okay, so we'll keep collecting questions in the chat to close out, but we're going to move to some rapid fire now. Fonta, are you ready?
No. I know
I'll go easy on you. Okay, so first one, what is the last book you read or show you binge watched?
Oh man, I love Unforgettable on Netflix. It's so good. Kevin Hart's hilarious. So I watch TV to make my brain stop working at night. That was the last one.
What's your last Google search?
Oh gosh, last Google search. Whew. You're gonna think I'm lying, but Finicity.
Do you own cryptocurrency?
I do. Believe it or not, I met the CEO of Coinbase when I was a diplomat in Kenya. Believe it or not, I escorted him to an event. He was like, "Go ahead, I'm just put in $25 or so. Trust me." So I did. I lost my code though. So I'm still working on that, but I do own cryptocurrency, and I actually do use some other really cool solutions like BlockFi. So
very cool. Last advice you gave to a friend?
Last advice I gave to a friend. That's a good one. I guess, yeah. Candidly, you're dope, and don't let anyone else tell you otherwise.
Love it.
Yeah.
What's the most millennial thing you do?
The most millennial thing that I do, man. You know, it's funny. I was at a happy hour with some friends not too long ago, and we're all sitting at the bar drinking, and everybody's on their cell phone, but we're together. So I think that's something that's very millennial.
Definitely qualifies. TikTok or Instagram?
Instagram. Yeah, but actually, I will be, to be honest, I'm not a huge social media person, believe it or not. I prefer closed communities of people you know and trust, which is what Wellthi does. So I'm not huge on online that way.
Billionaires in space, is this all hype and ridiculous, or is this legitimately cool?
You know what? I track NASA's Twitter feed and their IG page. So I would say billionaires and say that's awesome. And I would love to go.
What is a COVID trend you actually hope stays around?
You know, honestly, the COVID trend that stays around, gosh, I was going to be saying something like 6 feet, please. But no, honestly, I would say working from home. Believe it or not, our team has gotten really productive working from home. It makes you be intentional about your together time. And I think that's a good thing. And gives them flexibility.
What would your, just a few left, what would your superpower be?
Oh man, mind control. Come on, of course.
You will invest in Wellthi.
At the valuation that I asked for.
And then lastly is, what is the first major trip that you'll take as a global citizen as you are when you don't have to wear a mask on a plane?
Yeah, oh gosh, personal or professional?
Either.
Okay.
Or both.
Yeah. So I owe my daughter a trip to Paris. She's been bugging me about getting to Paris and also Greece. She wants to see, you know, the all of those beautiful monuments. So that's on the list for this summer, I hope.
Great. Yeah. Hopefully, again, with no mask this coming summer, that would be incredible, right?
Yes, I'm so over the mask. I do use them though.
Great. So just a few wrap-up questions, and I'm going to weave in those that came in from the line. So thank you. That was really fun. So now looking ahead, you have a lot of milestones that you're planning on for 2022. Yeah. You probably don't even get this 2-week break right now because you're so busy. But
no.
You know, what's next for you, and what's next for Wellthi?
Yeah, we're working on a big product deployment in Q1. Super excited about it. Rolling about our new Mastercard offering, also pretty dope. You know, and I think for us, we do have a seed round that we're looking to close. So we just kind of opened that this month and probably be closing that out mid-January. And we got commitments that have come in. So we're really excited about that. Yeah, it's a lot going on.
A lot going on. And you obviously will be fundraising again. And with that comes, you know, growing a team. So how are you thinking about hiring? And then, you know, finding the right talent for your team. But then also, how are you thinking about building out your board and the advisors that you're working with?
Yeah. So all of that. And, you know, what we've had to do is really kind of divide and conquer. So NECA does a great job with our board and kind of thinking through the next iteration of what that looks like. We've gotten some opportunities to bring on some folks from potentially IBM, hopefully Mastercard one day soon, wink, wink. So always got to cultivate the board though, because when you need to kind of ground truth your ideas or need access that you can't get to, they're huge. You know, and I think we're just trying to take it one step at a time. You know, solve this problem, go to the next problem, solve that problem. You know, that's how you kind of get to the finish line. So that's what we're chugging along.
Great. And then just in terms of like, as you think about globality and new markets, in addition to the product launch, are you thinking about any type of expansion outside of the US?
Oh, yes, definitely. We're actually getting a lot of interest from banks in Europe and East Africa, believe it or not. We have been chatting with Mastercard's Africa team, which we would have never thought about doing without the StartPath kind of connection and capabilities that can help us move fast there. There are a lot of banks that are interested in these emerging markets where informal social finance is so ubiquitous. Are really excited about this social finance software that we're bringing to market. And so that's definitely on the purview. But, you know, I would love to explore what we can do on that front.
Really exciting. And the last question on the line is then just what are some of the resources that you use today and in the future for like blogs and books that you read and rely on? I know you mentioned your 2 favorite books, but any like publications that you follow that you will continue to into next year?
Yeah. So I'm a huge fan of, let's see, a couple things here. Definitely love the podcast, you know, How I Built This, Lend It USA, love those folks. Also do a lot of kind of Harvard Business Review, kind of Washington Business Journal. Also kind of my go-tos, I'm a news junkie, just generally. In terms of resources, again, I cannot say enough about Envision and becoming a guru with that or some type of prototyping software. I live on Envision in many days. And then I think, you know, outside of that, really looking forward to a lot of these industry conferences that are coming online. Blockchain and crypto are definitely on kind of our product roadmap as we think about cross-border payments and cross-border wealthies. And so we'll be attending a lot of those kind of forums, either to get kind of in front of some industry experts and see what makes sense for us.
Great. So just one last chance for anybody on the line to maybe go off mute and ask a question. Otherwise. Okay, I think Fonta, we did it. A full 55 minutes of so much insight. In particular, I really liked hearing, as I always do, really about the genesis of Wellthi, of course, but then your transition from being a professional in the government space and even as a management consultant to an entrepreneur, how you've built your team with social impact at the heart of everything that you do, both in your bottom line, but also in the way that you've built and scaled your culture. And then some of just the candid responses that you gave about how tough it is to fundraise as a female, and you know how to think about creative ways to just hack your way through to, you know, Series A, Series B, and beyond. So I personally learned so much on this. Thank you for your time, and I guess we'll pass it back to Andy for some final remarks.
Thank you, Sabrina. I really enjoyed it. Really appreciate you guys too.
Absolutely. Thank you both for such an amazing conversation. It was really insightful and really fantastic to get to know you better, Fonta, and you as well, Sabrina. This is the second program that you've gotten to participate in with New York Tech Alliance, and we really, really appreciate your time, especially as a founder. We know it's so valuable. So thank you to you both for the support that you've given the organization. To any of the founders on the line, you know, we will be circulating the video as well as a recap of the questions and some other materials. We'll try to put a list of resources together for you that Fonta mentioned. So such valuable information there. So we'll try to collect a list from the recording and send that out as well. And with that, you know, just thank you both so much. Can you both tell me really quickly, what are you both looking to most? One happy, fantastic thing that's happened to you either in the last week or that's coming up this week? Sabrina, why don't you go first?
Okay, mine's big news. I haven't told Fonta yet either, but we're finally publicly talking about the fact that I'm expecting.
Yay, congratulations. That's amazing.
So yeah, this is the week that we finally started to tell some people outside of the family. So that's my pretty big news. That's not just this week though, that's like lifetime.
Yeah, that's forever amazing news.
At least 18 years. I'm so excited for you. That's awesome. Congrats.
Thank you.
I feel like I don't have anything better than that.
I know, maybe I should have had Fonta go first.
Sabrina's baby. I want baby pictures.
Yeah.
I'm 7.5 months over here, so you'll get that very soon.
Very cool. Yeah. You know, since we're being very transparent, my husband and I never had a honeymoon because I was running my startup. And it wasn't good timing. So we're doing that this year in 2022. So I'm really excited about it. And he's kind of, you know, looking at me like we're doing it this time. So he's a sweetheart. He knows me well, but I'm looking forward to that beach time with him.
Yeah. Talk about that accountability, right? Someone
accountable. It's awful. It's awful.
No, that's amazing. Well, both really fantastic again, having you both on here. Do you mind if we circulate your contact information to the group that was online? Awesome. So we will also include that in the follow-up email. And again, I cannot iterate how wonderful it was to hear that conversation and for you to share as much as you did. We thank you both. It was a great event to close out our 2021 programming. And again, we hope everybody has a fantastic holiday, and we will see you in 2022. So thank you all and enjoy.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.